Parking
You can't
garage
hide
B2 never
here.
fully goes dark.
Please leave me alone.
It just goes wrong.
Not
The
until you give
fluorescent
it to
tube
me.
above Bay 14
I
has been
don't have
dying
it.
for 6 weeks.
You can't
The
hide
maintenance
here.
request ignored.
Please
The
leave me
flicker
alone.
ignored.
Not
Everything
until you
about this
give it to
corner of
me.
the building designed
I
to be
don't
forgotten.
have it.
Maria Becker knows this because she parks here every single night. Knows the way the light buzzes like a trapped insect. Knows the smell of cold concrete and old motor oil. She does not know the footsteps behind her until it is already too late. His hand finds her shoulder before she can turn thick fingers, a grip that doesn't negotiate, and the next second her back hits the concrete pillar so hard the air leaves her lungs in a single, punished exhale. The rough texture of the wall drags against her dark jacket, against the maroon of her shirt underneath, and her bag hits the floor and she doesn't even look at it because the man in front of her is filling every inch of her vision. He is broad, scruffy, wearing a heavy jacket that has seen more back alleys than she ever wants to count. His jaw is set like something that has never once been told no. He leans his entire body weight into the space in front of her, not touching, not yet just occupying, the way a predator occupies the only exit. "Marcus ran," he says. His voice is flat, bored, almost insulted. So now somebody in his family pays. Maria's eyes are wide. Her breathing is shallow and fast. Her hands press flat against the concrete behind her like the wall might open up and swallow her if she just pushes hard enough. She thinks about running the math 3 steps to her left, the gap between him and the parked sedan, her keys still in her jacket pocket. And then she hears it. A car door, opening slowly, deliberately, like someone who has never once needed to rush. The man in front of her doesn't hear it. He is too busy watching the fear move across her face, too busy enjoying the power of this moment, too busy being the biggest thing in the room. He will not be the biggest thing in this room for much longer. The red glow hits first, taillights deep, arterial red bleeding across the wet concrete floor from somewhere behind him, painting the entire garage in the color of a warning. Maria sees it creep across the ground, sees it climb the pillar beside her head. Then she sees him. He steps into the light the way the light was already waiting for him. Yong-ki moves without urgency, hands loose at his sides, shoulders perfectly level, each footstep placed with the unhurried precision of a man who has never once needed to run. His suit is charcoal, immaculately cut, the kind of tailoring that doesn't exist in any shop on this side of the city. Dark shirt beneath. No tie, but that somehow makes it worse. More deliberate. Like even the rules of formality bend to his preference. His face is composed in a way that shouldn't be possible in this situation, not calm exactly. Calm implies the absence of danger. This is something else. This is a man who is the danger and has simply made peace with that fact. Behind him, framed in the open car door, a figure stands like a monument, massive, still, watching everything and reacting to nothing, because nothing here requires a reaction yet. The enforcer still hasn't turned around. He is still leaning toward Maria, still reading the terror in her eyes, still completely, catastrophically unaware that the entire power structure of this garage has just been rewritten. Maria watches Yong-ki close the distance 4 steps, 3, 2, and his eyes never leave her face. Not the enforcer. Her. There is something in that gaze she cannot name yet. Recognition. Calculation. Something that sits under both of those things like a river under ice. He stops 2 feet behind the enforcer. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Bois. 1 word. Korean. Quiet as a knife being set down on a table. The enforcer goes very, very still. And in the suffocating silence of Bay 14, under the dying flicker of a fluorescent tube nobody ever fixed, Maria Becker understands for the first time that she has not been rescued. She has been collected. Why was a Korean mafia boss already in that garage? Why does he look at Maria like he already knows her name? And what does a man like Yong-ki want with a woman who has nothing left to lose? Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. The enforcer turns slowly. The way a man turns when he is absolutely certain the interruption doesn't matter, when he is so confident in the architecture of his own threat that he cannot imagine anything dismantling it. He sees Yongki and his body makes a decision before his brain does. It steps back, just once, just half a step, but it is enough. "I don't know who you are," the enforcer says, and his voice has lost the bored flatness it carried a moment ago. Something thin and uncertain has replaced it. "But this doesn't concern you." Yongki looks at him the way a man looks at a clock on the wall, noting the time, moving on. "Walk away," Yongki says, still quiet, still perfectly level. "I won't say it again." The enforcer makes the last bad decision of his evening. His hand moves toward his jacket. What happens next takes less time than the fluorescent light takes to complete one flicker. Yongki's right hand catches the enforcer's wrist before the jacket even opens. A grip that looks casual, almost gentle, and then there is a sound that belongs in a hospital, not a parking garage. And the enforcer folds at the knees with a choked noise that he will be embarrassed about later if he is in any condition to feel embarrassment. Yongki releases him, steps back, straightens his cuff. The enforcer is on the ground, cradling his wrist, breathing in sharp, jagged pulls. The massive man from the car door, the monument in the dark suit, has moved without Maria noticing. He is beside the enforcer now, a phone already at his ear, speaking in low Korean. He reaches down and removes a weapon from the enforcer's jacket with the bored efficiency of a man emptying a dishwasher. Yongki turns to Maria. She hasn't moved. Her back is still against the pillar, her hands still flat on the concrete, her bag still on the floor where it fell. She is staring at him, and her expression has shifted from terror into something more complicated. Still afraid, but now the fear has company, confusion, the beginning of a question she doesn't know how to finish. "Your name is Maria Becker," Yongki says. Not a question. She doesn't answer immediately. Her chin lifts a fraction, not defiance. Not yet. Just the reflex of someone who has learned that showing too much too fast costs you. "Who are you?" she says. Someone who knows what that man was here for. He tilts his head toward the enforcer on the floor, who is now being hoisted upright by two men Maria didn't see arrive. They move him toward a stairwell door with practiced silence. "And someone who knows it won't stop with him." "I didn't ask what you know. I asked who you are." Something shifts in his face. So slight, she almost misses it, the ghost of something that might, in a different man, be appreciation. It's gone before she can be sure it was ever there. "Get in the car," he says. "I'm not getting in your car." "Miss Becker." He says her name with a patience that somehow feels more dangerous than the enforcer's aggression did. "There are two more men in this garage. They came with him. They are not on the floor." He pauses. "Get in the car." Maria looks past him. The red taillights still bleed across the wet concrete. The Mercedes is massive and black and silent, idling like something alive. The open door waits. She picks up her bag. She gets in the car. The city moves past the tinted windows like a film she is watching from very far away. Maria sits rigid in the back seat, her bag in her lap, her hands folded over it with a tightness that is the only honest thing she will allow herself right now. Yongki sits beside her with his jacket still perfectly unrumpled, his hands resting loosely on his thighs, looking out his own window like this is any other Tuesday. The massive henchman drives. She learns later his name is Day. Tonight he is just a wall of silence behind the wheel. "Where are you taking me?" Maria asks. "Somewhere safe." "I have an apartment." "They know your apartment." She turns to look at him. His profile is sharp in the passing streetlights. High cheekbones, a jaw that could have been cut rather than grown, dark eyes that track the road without appearing to move. He looks like money that has never once needed to announce itself. "They," she repeats. "The men behind the debt your brother accumulated." He says it without inflection, without cruelty, which is somehow worse than if he'd been cruel. Just information. Just the shape of the problem. Marcus did not simply borrow money, Miss Becker. He borrowed it from people who use debt as a tool, who use the people attached to that debt as leverage. He finally turns to look at her. "You were not a collection call tonight. You were a message. Maria says nothing. She looks out the window and watches the city she has lived in her entire life rearrange itself into something unfamiliar and threatening. "I can handle myself," she says. And even as she says it, she hears how hollow it sounds in the leather interior of this car, with this man beside her, heading somewhere she doesn't know. "I know you can," he says. And something in the way he says it, not condescending, not placating, simply matter of fact, makes her turn to look at him again. But he has already returned to his window. The penthouse is on the 43rd floor of a building downtown, whose lobby looks like it was designed to make you feel poor just by standing in it. Maria steps out of the elevator into a space that is all floor-to-ceiling glass and low light, and the kind of silence that expensive square footage buys. The city spreads itself out below like a circuit board, glittering and indifferent. A woman meets them at the elevator, small, precise, wearing the expression of someone who has efficiently managed catastrophic situations for years. She speaks to Yong-ki in Korean, hands him a folder, glances once at Maria with the professional neutrality of someone who has seen all manner of things arrive on this floor and has learned not to have opinions about it. "There is a room prepared," Yong-ki says, turning to Maria. "You'll find everything you need. I need to go home. Tomorrow. Now." He looks at her with that same unreadable patience. "There are clean clothes in the room. There is food if you want it. There are no locks on the doors inside this apartment." He pauses. "There is, however, a man named Jin stationed at the elevator, and he has been asked to redirect anyone attempting to leave until morning. That's imprisonment. That's protection. The distinction matters even when it doesn't feel like it." He hands her bag to the precise woman, who carries it toward a hallway, and before Maria can object further, Yong-ki has moved toward a set of frosted glass doors at the far end of the room and closed them quietly behind him. She stands in the middle of 43 floors of glass and silence and thinks about screaming, decides against it, decides that screaming has never once solved a single thing in her life, and tonight is unlikely to be the exception. She goes to the room. She does not sleep. By morning, the plan is simple. It has the clarity that comes from lying awake for 6 hours constructing it. The room's window looks down onto a service alley on the building's east side. There is a fire door, 2 corridors from the elevator. She found it at 3 a.m. During a careful reconnaissance, she told herself, was just stretching. The precise woman, whose name she learns is Sun Ah, brings coffee at 7 and does not lock anything on her way out. Maria waits 20 minutes, then moves. The fire door is exactly where it was at 3 a.m. She pushes through into a concrete stairwell that smells like the parking garage she is trying to forget, and takes the stairs fast, 4 flights down to a service level, then a corridor that leads to a door marked "Deliveries" that opens onto a side street with actual sunlight in it. She is 3 steps into that sunlight when a hand closes gently but completely around her arm. Not Day. Someone else, shorter, younger, with careful eyes and a dark jacket. He shakes his head once, almost apologetically. "Miss Becker." His English is precise, slightly accented. "There is a black SUV at the end of this block. It has been there since 4 this morning. There is a man in the coffee shop across the street who has not ordered anything since he sat down 2 hours ago." He releases her arm, steps back, gives her the street, the sunlight, her own choice. "Mr. Yong would like you to come back upstairs, but the decision is yours." Maria looks at the black SUV, looks at the coffee shop window and finds, without any difficulty at all, the man who has not ordered anything. He is watching the building entrance. He has a stillness about him that is professional rather than patient. She goes back upstairs. Yong-ki is at the long kitchen counter when she returns, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, holding a coffee cup and reading something on a tablet. He looks up when she walks in, does not say "I told you so," does not say anything about where she went or how far she got. "Sit down," he says instead. "There are things you need to know." She sits. Sana appears with coffee and disappears again. "The men outside are not connected to the loan shark," Yong-ki says, setting the tablet down. "They arrived independently. Different vehicle registration, different weapons pattern, Different method of surveillance. He folds his hands on the counter. Someone else knows you exist. I'm a nobody, Maria says. I work in logistics. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. My most dangerous habit is jaywalking. Your brother is not a nobody. My brother is an idiot who borrowed money from the wrong people. Your brother, Young-ki says, and there is a shift in his voice, something that isn't quite weight but is adjacent to it. Borrowed money that was designed to be borrowed. The debt was constructed. The terms were impossible to meet by design. He watches her absorb that. Marcus was a mechanism, not a debtor. The question is a mechanism for what? Maria sets her coffee down. Her hand is steadier than it has any right to be. You know a lot about my brother's finances for someone who just happened to be in that parking garage last night. The silence that follows is a different kind of silence than the ones that have come before it. This one has texture. This one is thinking. Young-ki sets his own cup down. I was not in that garage by coincidence, he says. He says it simply, without preamble, the way a man says something he has decided to stop not saying. I have been aware of your situation for several months, Miss Becker. He stands from the counter, moves toward the window, and looks out at the city with his hands loose at his sides. Your father, Dr. Heinrich Becker. Maria goes very still. My father has been dead for 4 years. I know. He turns from the window. 8 years ago, when I first came to this country, I was shot twice in a freight yard 2 miles east of this building. The men I was with were either dead or running. I had no hospital I could go to, none that were safe. No clinic. I had a name written on a piece of paper that someone trusted gave me before I left Seoul. An address. He pauses. Your father ran an underground clinic out of a building on Mercer Street. He operated on me on a kitchen table with instruments that should not have been adequate for what needed doing. He asked no questions. He accepted no payment. Something moves across Young-ki's face, brief, controlled, real. He sat with me through the fever that came 3 days later, and he told me, when I was coherent enough to understand it, that he helped people because the world had a deficit of people who helped people. Maria's throat is tight. She knows her father said things like that, in exactly that rhythm. He made me promise one thing before I left, Young-ki continues. He said he had 2 children. He said if either of them ever needed it, if his work in that clinic ever caught up with his family, if the wrong people ever came looking, that I would make sure they were safe. He meets her eyes. I am a man who honors debts, especially ones of that kind. The silence that follows is the longest one yet. He never told me, Maria says finally. Her voice is careful and quiet. About the clinic. About any of it. He wouldn't have. He protected the people he loved from the weight of what he carried. Young-ki moves back to the counter. You carry that same quality, Miss Becker. I have been watching long enough to notice. She looks at him across the kitchen counter and tries to understand who this person is, this precisely dressed, terrifyingly composed man who is telling her that her father saved his life on a kitchen table and that he has been quietly watching over her ever since, honoring a promise made to a dead man who never told anyone the promise had been made. I don't want to be someone's debt repaid, she says. You're not. He holds her gaze. But the people outside that building don't know that. And until we understand who sent them and why, you staying alive is the most important variable in every calculation I'm running. He extends his hand across the counter, not romantically, not submissively, just offered, like a contract. Truce? Maria looks at his hand. She thinks about the SUV at the end of the block, the man who never ordered anything, the weight of everything she did not know about her own father sitting in her chest like a new room she has just discovered in a house she thought she knew. She takes his hand. Truce, she says. But I want answers. Real ones. Every time I ask. Agreed. She releases his hand and picks up her coffee. Starting with why your people are tracing the loan shark's weapons instead of just making him disappear. Young-ki looks at her for a moment that is slightly longer than strictly necessary. Then something happens at the corner of his mouth, the barest suggestion of something that is not quite a smile but is the structural precursor to one. You've been listening through the walls, he says. The walls are not as thick as you think. He picks up his tablet. Then let me show you what we found. The transport happens 3 days later. The plan is clean. A vehicle transfer across the city to a secured location where Yongki's forensic contact can run serial numbers on the weapons recovered from the garage, and the 2 men Sun A's surveillance caught. Photographing the building on the morning Maria tried to leave. 2 cars. A route that changes 3 times before they depart. Day driving the lead vehicle. Yongki and Maria in the second car with a man named Chul riding alongside the driver. Maria sits beside Yongki in the back seat and watches the city slide past and thinks that 3 days ago she was complaining to a coworker about a shipment manifest error, and it feels like a story about someone else's life. How do you do it? She asks. He doesn't look up from his phone. Do what? Live like this, knowing the exits in every room, never sitting with your back to a door. She has noticed things. She has been noticing things constantly since the garage, because the garage taught her what happens when you stop noticing, knowing that the coffee shop across the street might have someone in it who is watching you. He is quiet for a moment. You stop experiencing it as tension, he says finally. It becomes grammar, the structure under everything. He glances at her. You've been cataloging exits yourself. She opens her mouth to deny it. Doesn't. 3rd floor of the penthouse, she says. North stairwell requires a key card, but the south one doesn't. The service elevator has a manual override panel behind the maintenance hatch. There's a parking structure 2 buildings east that connects to this block via an underground walkway. He says nothing for 3 full seconds. You're right on all counts, he says. I work in logistics, she says. I route things. I find efficiencies. I think about how objects move through space. She looks out the window. Turns out that's useful for other applications. He is looking at her with an attention that has a different quality now, not the protective surveillance of the past 3 days, not the calculated assessment of the garage, but something more present, more direct. She feels it without turning to look. The first shot hits the lead car. It comes from above, a burst that takes out the rear window and sends Day into an immediate controlled swerve that Maria recognizes even in its violence as deliberate. Their driver has already accelerated, pulling left, putting a parked truck between them and the angle of fire. Down, Yongki says, and his hand is already on her shoulder pressing her below window level, and his voice has not changed pitch by a single degree. Maria drops. She is not proud of how fast she drops, but she is also not ashamed of it. Fast is correct. Fast is the right answer. From below the window line, she hears things. The crack of a second shot, closer. The screech of tires that is Day's car executing something sharp and deliberate. Chul in the front seat is on a radio, speaking in rapid Korean, his voice precise and flat. The car is still moving. Then Yongki is gone from beside her. She twists to look, and he is half risen in his seat, the window cracked 2 inches, doing something with his right hand that she cannot fully see. She hears 2 sounds, controlled, measured, nothing like the movies, and then a distant impact that is very final. Silence from the rooftop angle. Yongki settles back into the seat. He straightens his jacket. He looks down at her, crouched below the window. Clear from that position, he says. Stay down until Day confirms the second shooter. There's a second shooter? There was. His phone buzzes. He reads the message. There isn't any more. Maria slowly pulls herself back up onto the seat. Her hands are shaking, not violently, just a fine tremor she cannot stop through willpower alone. She presses them flat on her thighs and focuses on breathing, on the city outside the window which is continuing its day as though nothing has happened, as though 2 shooters are not currently dealt with somewhere above the roofline. She looks at Yongki. He is already back on his phone. You shot through a 4-inch gap in the window, she says. He says nothing. He is already back on his phone. While we were moving, we were slowing for a light. She stares at him. He seems genuinely unbothered, not performing calm, not suppressing something, just actually fundamentally at ease in a way that should be disturbing and is, instead, the most stabilizing thing in the car right now. Who sends a two-man sniper team in the middle of a city morning? She asks. Someone who is willing to absorb the exposure risk. Someone with resources. He locks his phone. His jaw has tightened by a fraction. Someone who knew our route. The car is quiet. Maria hears it a half-second before he says it. Someone who knew our route, she repeats, meaning someone who had access to the route. He looks at her, meaning it came from inside, she says. The weapons tell the story. They take their time about it, the way the worst stories always do, revealing themselves in fragments, in serial numbers and shipping manifests, and dead-end registrations that turn out, when you follow them far enough back, not to be dead ends at all. Yongki has a room in the penthouse that Maria is not supposed to have accessed yet. It takes her until the day after the ambush to find it, and she finds it because she is doing what she always does when she cannot sleep, which is walk and notice and catalog. The door is unlocked because in Yongki's world, the security is human rather than mechanical, and every human in this apartment is currently focused on the feeds from the building exterior. She pushes the door open and finds a room that looks like a logistics operation, which is perhaps why it feels, immediately and uncomfortably, like her own natural habitat. Screens, maps, shipping route overlays, and on the central table, spread in precise arrangement, the recovered weapons from both the garage and the ambush. She is cross-referencing shipping records on one of the screens when Yongki walks in. He stops in the doorway, looks at what she is doing, does not ask how she got in. The serial numbers on the garage weapons were filed, she says, not turning around, but not ground. Just filed, which means they wanted them untraceable for a specific job, not permanently. Amateur preservation decision, because the base stamp is still partially legible on two of them. She pulls up a screen. This model, this manufacturer, this production run there are only 4 import channels that carried this batch into the country in the last 18 months. 3 of them route through legitimate arms dealerships. 1 routes through a freight consolidation point in the port district. She turns around. I know that consolidation point, she says. I worked a routing contract that touched it 2 years ago. It's a legitimate freight hub on the surface. But it was acquired 14 months ago by a holding company. She pauses. I ran the holding company. It took me 40 minutes. Yongki has moved fully into the room. He is standing very still with his arms crossed and his eyes on the screen she has pulled up. The holding company name is there in clean text. She watches him read it, watches something happen in his face that she has not seen before, not fear, nothing as readable as fear. More like the specific internal recalibration of a man who has just had a fact confirmed that he hoped would remain unconfirmed. You know it, she says. He is quiet for a long moment. Long enough that she doesn't push, just waits, because she has learned that this man's silences are not avoidances, they are loading sequences. The holding company belongs to a shell, he says, and the shell routes back to an account I recognize. Someone in my inner circle helped establish it. He uncrosses his arms, sets his hands flat on the table and looks at the screen. His jaw is tight. Someone close to me, someone who has known how I think for 15 years. The room is very quiet. Your mentor, Maria says carefully. Someone at the top of my organization, he says. Someone who knew about your father, who knew I would come. He straightens. His voice is controlled in the way of a man exerting significant force to keep it controlled. I have a name in my head. I need one more confirmation before I say it out loud. Maria thinks about what she knows about traps, about how the best ones look, from the inside, exactly like ordinary life until the moment they don't. He knew about my father, she says. He knew about the debt you owed. He knew you'd come if he put me in danger. Yes. He wanted you out of the penthouse, out of your protected territory, exposed. Yes. Why? Yongki finally looks at her, away from the screen, away from the confirmation of his mentor's betrayal, directly at her face. Because I have been moving to restructure the syndicate's operations, he says. Away from the business that has made certain people very wealthy, someone in my inner circle has been building his own alliances quietly for 2 years. If I complete the restructure, those alliances become worthless. His voice is flat and clear, and has something underneath it that is not quite grief but shares a border with it. He needed me dead before I could finish what I started. Maria holds his gaze. She thinks about trust, what it costs, what it means. What happens to a person who discovers that the most trusted person in their life has been carefully, systematically pointing a weapon at them? She thinks about the 4 years she spent after her father died, believing he was simply a good man with a small practice and no secrets. "I'm sorry," she says, and she means it without qualification. He looks at her for a moment, nods once small, precise, real. "We need to move before he knows we've found it," he says. Once Sung Jin understands the weapons trail has been followed, he will stop being patient. He pulls out his phone. He will stop trying to draw us out and start trying to end this directly. So, what do? We do what he is not expecting. He looks up from his phone. We go to him first. He starts to move toward the door. Maria stays at the table. "Young Ki." He stops. "You said we," she says. The pause is brief. He looks back at her over his shoulder. "I did," he says. And then he walks out to make the calls that will begin the next and most dangerous thing. And Maria stands in the room full of screens and maps and the evidence of a 15-year betrayal, and feels the shape of the world she has stepped into settling around her like something that was, impossibly, always meant to fit. The safe house is not what Maria expects. She expects something sterile, another penthouse, another floor of glass and controlled silence, and Sun Ah appearing with coffee at precise intervals. What she gets instead is a 2-story stone house 40 minutes outside the city, buried at the end of an unpaved road, surrounded by enough trees that the sky comes through in pieces rather than all at once. The heat comes from a wood stove. The Wi-Fi doesn't exist. There are 3 rooms, mismatched furniture, and a kitchen with a window that looks out onto nothing but dark tree line and the occasional conviction that something is moving in it. Day stays outside, the monument doing what monuments do. Inside, it is just the 2 of them. The first evening is careful. They move around each other with the precise courtesy of people who have not yet established the geography of shared small space. Maria claims the kitchen table for her work, a paper map, the printed records she photographed before they left, a notebook she found in a drawer with half its pages already used by someone else for something she doesn't try to decipher. Yong Ki takes the far end of the main room, his jacket finally draped over the back of a chair rather than worn, his sleeves rolled up again. Working a phone that still has signal because Day brought a relay device she was not told about, she notices, after the first hour, that he has positioned his chair so that the window is to his left and the door is directly in his sightline. She notices, after the second hour, that he has noticed her noticing. Neither of them says anything about it. It is the wood stove that breaks the careful distance. Maria has not operated a wood stove since a camping trip at 14 that she has spent the subsequent years trying to forget on grounds of comprehensive incompetence. And the temperature drops sharply after dark in a way that the stone walls don't argue with. She stands in front of the stove, working through the logic of it: damper, airflow, the precise stacking geometry of the logs, and is on the 3rd failed attempt when Yong Ki materializes beside her without announcement and takes the matches from her hand. He builds the fire in about 90 seconds. He doesn't explain what he's doing or narrate the process. He just does it, and it catches, and he steps back and returns to his chair. "Where did you learn that?" Maria asks. A pause. "My grandmother's house, outside Busan." He picks up his phone. "We had no central heating until I was 11. She looks at him, this man in his partially unbuttoned dress shirt, his charcoal suit trousers, his shoes that cost more than her monthly rent, crouching in front of a wood stove with the muscle memory of a cold childhood. "You're not what I keep expecting you to be," she says. He looks up. "That's not an insult," she adds. "I know," he says, and goes back to his phone. But something in the room has shifted, some atmospheric pressure has changed, the way it changes before weather. Later, when the fire is established and the room is warm and the dark outside the windows has gone from threatening to simply dark, Maria makes tea with what she finds in the cupboard, which is not much, and brings 2 cups to the low table between the chairs, because it would be stranger not to. Yong-ki sets his phone face down when she sits, which she registers as the significant gesture it is. "Tell me about your father," he says. "Not what I know, what you know." So she does. She tells him about a man who was, on the surface, a quiet GP in a mid-sized practice, who came home every evening at 6:30 and cooked dinner badly and helped with homework with genuine patience even when the homework was wrong, who had a shelf of medical ethics texts that he'd actually read and annotated, who took Marcus to football on Saturdays and took Maria to the library on Sundays, and never appeared to carry anything heavier than ordinary fatherhood. "I knew there was something else," she says. "There were nights he didn't come home until very late, and the explanation was always thin. Emergencies," he said. Patients who needed him. She holds her cup in both hands. "I thought maybe he was having an affair." That felt like the obvious explanation for a grown adult. The idea that he was running an underground clinic for people who couldn't risk a hospital, that he was doing it quietly for years and carrying it completely alone. She stops. That's more like him than the affair, actually. He didn't do things halfway, and he didn't ask for credit. "No," Yong-ki says. "He didn't." They sit with that for a moment. "Tell me about Sung-jin," she says, because she has been wanting to ask and has been waiting for a moment when it wouldn't feel like pressing a bruise for her own curiosity. Yong-ki is quiet long enough that she thinks he might redirect. Then he sets his own cup down and looks at the fire. "I came to this country with 3 contacts and enough money to survive 4 months if I was careful," he says. Sung-jin was one of the 3 contacts. He was 15 years older, already established, already connected. He could have used me as labor and discarded me when I stopped being useful. He pauses. He didn't. He taught me how to read a room, how to build loyalty, how to think 10 steps ahead of a situation rather than reacting to it. His jaw tightens. "Everything I know about running an operation I learned by watching him, which means he also knows exactly how I think. Every contingency I'll run, every move I'll make. That's what makes him dangerous. That's what makes him the most dangerous person I have ever encountered." He finally looks away from the fire, including myself. Maria holds his gaze. In the firelight, he looks different, less composed, or perhaps more honestly composed. The careful blankness he wears like armor slightly softened at the edges. She can see the thing underneath it now. Not vulnerability exactly, nothing so simple. More like the weight of a man who has been the most capable person in every room for so long that he has forgotten what it feels like to be uncertain. He looks uncertain now. About Sung-jin, about the shape of a betrayal that is still being understood. "You trusted him completely," she says. "Not a judgment, just the fact of it." "Yes, and he spent that trust like currency." "Yes." She reaches across the space between the chairs not far. The table is small and sets her hand over his. It is a gesture she does not plan and does not second-guess, because it is simply the correct response to what is in his face, and she has stopped pretending she doesn't see it. He looks down at her hand, then up at her face. "Maria," he says, and the way he says her name is different from every time he has said it before. No title, no distance, just her name in his voice, like something he has been careful with and is now choosing to set down. "I know," she says. Because she does. Because whatever this is has been building since a parking garage under red light, since a kitchen counter and an extended hand, since a man who kept a promise to her dead father for 8 years without ever asking to be thanked for it. She doesn't move her hand. He turns his over and holds it. They stay like that while the fire works through the night. And outside, Day stands in the dark doing what he does, and the trees are full of whatever the trees are full of. And inside the stone house with no Wi-Fi, 2 people who came together through violence and debt, and the long shadow of a kept promise, discover, quietly and without fanfare, that the wall between them has been down for longer than either of them admitted. They return to the city on the fourth morning at the safe house. The plan is layered, which is the only kind of plan Yong-ki makes. The goal is to surface long enough to confirm Sung-jin's location and supply chain before he realizes the weapons trail has been fully decoded. They will use one of Yong-ki's secondary operations as cover a business meeting at a warehouse space in the industrial district, innocuous on paper, attended by 4 of his most trusted lieutenants. Trusted, Maria thinks in the car on the way in, and then makes herself stop thinking it because trust is the exact variable that has already almost gotten them killed once. The meeting room is concrete and fluorescent. Everything in Yong-ki's world seems to be concrete and fluorescent, and she is beginning to understand that this is not coincidence but philosophy, the deliberate shedding of comfort as a strategic asset. 7 people around a table. Maps, photographs. Chul at the door. She is watching the room the way she has learned to watch rooms, which is to say she is watching people rather than furniture when she sees it. Minho, 26, quick-eyed, the youngest lieutenant by a decade. He has been with Yong-ki for 3 years, recruited personally by Sung-jin, and Maria knows this because she has read every personnel file in the operations room back at the penthouse, which Yong-ki stopped pretending to be surprised about by day 2. Minho's phone is under the table. His thumb moves once a single motion that is too short to be a message and too deliberate to be accidental. A signal. An acknowledgement. They're here. Maria's hand finds Yong-ki's forearm under the table before she has consciously decided to move. She presses once her own signal, sharp and intentional, and then moves her eyes, the smallest degree, toward Minho. She feels him still beside her. For approximately 3 seconds, nothing in the room changes. Then the door comes in. 4 men, armed, moving with the synchronized efficiency of a team that has rehearsed this specific room. Chul takes one down before he is fully through the doorway and is hit for it, going down hard against the wall, and Maria is already moving not away from the table, which is what everyone expects, but along it, using the chaos of the first 5 seconds the way water uses the path of least resistance. Chul is on the floor. He is conscious she can see him moving, see him trying to get upright, but his left arm isn't working right and there is a man stepping over him with a weapon coming up. Maria picks up the only thing on the table within reach, which is a laptop, and she throws it with the full torque of her body rotation at the man's face, and it connects, and he staggers. And that half second is enough for Chul to drive his working shoulder into the man's knee and bring them both down in a tangle. She feels the hands on her before she sees them. Not rough professional, which is somehow worse. An arm across her chest, movement backward toward the door, and she fights it with everything she has, her elbow, her heel, her full resistance. But there are 2 of them, and she is one, and the math does not resolve in her favor. The last thing she sees before they pull her through the door is Yong-ki's face across the room. He has 2 men down and is already moving toward her, and his expression, that carefully blank, controlled expression she has studied for days, has broken completely open into something raw and absolute and furious that she has never seen on him before, and hopes, distantly, that she will have the opportunity to see again under better circumstances. Yong-ki, she says, and then the door closes between them. The fury is very quiet. That is the thing about it, the thing that makes Day and Chul and every man in the war room move carefully, speak precisely, and keep their eyes on the table rather than on the man standing at the head of it. Yong-ki is not shouting. He is not breaking things. He is standing with his hands flat on the table and his head slightly bowed, and the silence coming off him has the specific quality of something that is holding enormous pressure at a very thin wall. Minho is restrained in a chair in the corner and has been there for 40 minutes and has said nothing useful and appears to understand, with the clarity that comes from looking directly at the thing you've been working against, that nothing useful is his best possible strategy right now. Chul is seated, his arm has been seen to, roughly but adequately, by Sun-Ah, who is calm in all circumstances, including this one, and is watching Yong-ki with the expression of a man who has served this person for 7 years and has never seen this particular version of him. She went into the door first, Chul says. His voice is careful. She put herself between me and their man before I could get upright. Without that, I don't. He stops. She bought me 20 seconds. Yong-ki does not respond immediately. His hands press slightly harder against the table. The holding location, he says. Confirm. Sung-jin's primary warehouse, Port District, the same facility that ran the weapons. Dae speaks from the far wall where he has been standing since they regrouped, his voice low and steady. He's been using it as a secondary operations base for the past year. We have 3 confirmed entry points. Rooftop access is monitored, but the east loading dock rotates guards on a 40-minute cycle. Weapons inventory. Sufficient, Dae says, and the word lands with a weight that satisfies nothing but confirms everything. Yong-ki finally lifts his head. He looks around the room at the men who have been with him for years, at the maps on the screens, at the shape of what needs to happen now and when he speaks. His voice is completely level, and carries underneath its levelness something that every person in the room hears and understands, without it needing to be named. We go tonight, he says. All of it. Every man. We do not do this quietly, and we do not do this cleanly, and we do not stop until every person who was in that room at the door is accounted for. He straightens, Sung-jin included. The room moves. Dae pushes off the wall and begins making calls. Chul, his arm bound tight against his chest, leans over the table with his good hand and drags the maps into position. Sun-Ah, who is not a fighter and has never claimed to be, hands Yong-ki a phone with a list of numbers and a set of coordinates without being asked, and then removes herself from the room with the timing of someone who understands exactly when their particular skills have reached their limit and someone else's need to begin. Min-ho, in his chair in the corner, watches all of it and says nothing. Yong-ki stops in front of him on the way to the door. He looks down at the young man who spent 3 years learning from him while feeding information in the other direction. And the silence between them has the specific weight of a thing that cannot be undone, or reframed, or explained away. You chose him, Yong-ki says. Min-ho meets his eyes. He recruited me before you did. I know. He holds the young man's gaze for one more moment. Then he walks out, and the door closes, and the war council becomes a war. The warehouse at the port smells like salt water and old metal, and the specific chemical sharpness of industrial cleaning products used to cover things that don't clean easily. Maria knows this because she has been in this room for what her body estimates at 6 hours, though her phone was taken, and her certainty about time has loosened at the edges. Her wrists are zip-tied to a chair arm, one arm, not both, which she catalogued immediately as either a confidence error or a logistical oversight, and has been filing away since the moment she made the observation. The room is a secondary storage space off the main warehouse floor. Corrugated metal walls, a single overhead light, bare bulb, 2 guards at the door, rotating every 30 minutes on a pattern she has confirmed through 3 repetitions. She is not thinking about whether Yong-ki is coming. She is thinking about what she is going to do before he gets here. The chair is metal and bolted to nothing. The zip tie is standard construction grade, not security grade. She knows this because she has ordered construction materials professionally for 6 years, and this is, objectively, not the correct restraint for the application. The overhead light has a fixture housing that is slightly rotated from its bracket, suggesting the bracket is loose. The guard rotation leaves a 40-second window during the exchange where both guards are facing each other rather than the room. She waits for the next rotation. When it comes, she uses the 40 seconds. She drives the chair sideways into the corrugated wall with enough force that the impact travels up the metal arm into the zip tie at the precise angle she has been calculating. And the tie catches on the chair's edge joint, and the second impact snaps it. Her wrist burns. She doesn't stop. She is on her feet before the guards have finished their exchange, moving to the fixture housing, and the bracket is loose in exactly the way she thought it was. And the fixture arm comes down with a quick twist, and she weighs it in her hand metal, 18 inches, imperfect but real, and she is behind the door when it opens. The first guard comes in looking for the noise. She is not where he expects her. She is not gentle about the fixture arm, and she is not proud of it, and she will deal with whatever she feels about it later, because later is a thing that requires surviving now. He goes down. The second guard is already through the door, and she is smaller and he is faster, but she is already moving, and the narrow doorframe is her friend rather than his. And she fights ugly and without grace, and with the desperate full-body commitment of someone who has run the math and understands that technically correct is less important than winning. She wins. Barely. Her lip is split and her shoulder has been introduced to the wall more forcefully than she'd prefer. She takes the second guard's radio, his weapon, steps over the first guard. The warehouse floor opens up in front of her, a massive space, stacked freight containers, the sound of activity somewhere toward the main doors that is louder than it should be for the hour, louder and more chaotic, and she registers what that means before she sees it. The east loading dock explodes inward. Not literally, it is a door, not a detonation, but the speed and force of its opening has the quality of an explosion, and Day is through it first like a geographical feature that has decided to relocate. And behind him come men she recognizes from the penthouse, from the car, from 6 days of learning the shape of Yongqi's world, and behind all of them, Yongqi. He is not in his suit jacket. The dress shirt is rolled to the elbows, and there is a darkness in him that is different from the penthouse, different from the garage, different from anything she has seen in 6 days. The controlled apex predator composure, stripped back to something raw, something that has made a decision and will not be discussed. He moves through the warehouse the way the warehouse belongs to him, which it shortly will in the only sense that matters. His eyes are scanning, sweeping the floor, the containers, the doorways. They find her. She is standing 30 feet from the secondary storage room, with a guard's radio in one hand and a guard's weapon in the other, and a split lip and a shoulder that is going to make its feelings known in the morning. He stops moving. For approximately 2 seconds, Yongqi, the man who dispatched an enforcer in 4 seconds, who shot through a 4-inch window gap while moving, who built a war council in 40 minutes flat, simply stops in the middle of his own assault and looks at her. Then she is moving toward him, and he is moving toward her, and the warehouse is full of sound and controlled chaos, and Day is directing men through the freight containers in the background, like the situation is already resolved. Which, maybe it is. Maybe the moment she walked out of that storage room under her own power was the moment it resolved. He catches her face in both hands when she reaches him, turns it, checking the split lip, the shoulder, the assessment running fast and complete behind his eyes. "I told you," she says, and her voice is rougher than she intends. "I can handle myself." "You handled yourself," he agrees. His hands are still on her face. His voice is doing the thing it did by the fire, the thing where the distance closes. Considerably well. From somewhere deeper in the warehouse comes a sound that is final in the specific way of things ending rather than pausing, and Yongqi's jaw sets for 1 moment before it releases. He looks over her head. Day is there, and he nods once, and Yongqi closes his eyes briefly. Sung Jin. When he opens them, there is something in his face that has no name and requires none. A door closing. The last one. Maria is still looking at his face. "Is it over?" she asks. "This part," he says. She nods, leans her forehead against his for exactly 1 moment, which is not enough and is also exactly enough. Then she straightens. "Your east loading dock bracket is compromised," she says. "You should have someone look at it." He looks at her. Then, he does the thing that has been the structural precursor to something for 6 days, and finally becomes the thing itself. He smiles, fully, briefly, real, and it changes his face so completely that she files it away immediately and carefully, the way she files the exits and the efficiencies and the routes, as something she intends to know the location of always. The aftermath has a texture she didn't anticipate. She expected chaos. She expected paperwork, consequences, the complex machinery of whatever happens when a criminal syndicate restructures itself following a war with its own inner circle. What she didn't expect is the specific quiet of the days that follow a different quiet from the penthouse's managed silence, something more settled, more like the stone house where there was no Wi-Fi and the fire-needed building, and two people found out what they were to each other without meaning to. Marcus's debt is dissolved. Yongki does this without ceremony, a document, Sun-A's witnessing, a file closed. Minho's file is closed differently. Maria does not ask how. She has learned which silences in this world are answers, and that one is. Marcus himself calls 3 days after the warehouse, and Maria talks to her brother for 40 minutes in the kitchen of the penthouse, and it is difficult and honest, and the most real conversation they have had in years. And when she hangs up, she sits at the counter for a long time, in the way of someone reorganizing the interior architecture of something important. Yong-ki comes in and makes coffee without being asked, and sets a cup in front of her and doesn't ask about the call. He reads something on his tablet. His jacket is over the chair again. "Marcus is okay," she says eventually. "Good. He wants to meet you." A pause. "I know. He's afraid of you. That's appropriate." She picks up the coffee. "I told him you were less frightening than you look." He glances up from the tablet. "That was generous." I said, "Less frightening. Not frightening." He almost smiles again. She is collecting these. On the 5th day, Chul comes to her, his arm in a proper sling now, his manner carrying the specific formality of a person who has something to say that they have rehearsed, and tells her, standing in the hallway outside the operations room, that he has served Yongki for 7 years, and that in 7 years he has watched a man run an empire with complete emotional efficiency, and that the efficiency, while effective, has cost things he could not name until recently when they became visible to him by contrast. He says this in the halting, precise English of someone translating not just language but the feeling under the language. Then he bows slightly and goes back to his work. Maria stands in the hallway for a moment, holding what he said, and then goes to find Yong-ki. He is in the operations room with Day and 2 of the remaining lieutenants, going over the restructure, the new routing, the legitimate transition that has been his project for the past 2 years. The thing Sung-jin tried to stop because it would have made him obsolete. She waits in the doorway until the meeting breaks. Day passes her on the way out and nods once, with a warmth that on Day's face requires careful observation to identify but is unmistakably there. Yong-ki looks up when the room empties. "Walk with me," he says. They go to the window, the 43 floors of city spread out below, the circuit board glittering in the late afternoon. Familiar now, in a way. It wasn't a week ago when she stood here, still shaking from a parking garage and a car she hadn't wanted to get into. "The restructure will take 18 months to complete," he says. "The legitimate operations will take precedence. The syndicate as it existed under the old structure will be disbanded progressively." He looks out at the city. "I can offer you something when it is done. A life removed from this. Resources. A clean start. Away from every part of what has happened in the last week." She looks at his profile, the cheekbones, the jaw, the dark eyes tracking the city that he has spent 15 years learning to run and is now choosing to change. "Is that what you're offering?" she says. "It's what you're owed. That's not the same as what I want." He turns to look at her. "What do you want?" he asks. And the question is direct and unguarded in the way he has only been since the fire in the stone house. Maria looks at the city, at the circuit board of a place she has lived her whole life that has reorganized itself over the past week into something larger and more complex, and she realizes, more hers than it ever felt when she was just routing shipments and ignoring parking garage maintenance requests. "The restructure," she says. "The legitimate transition. 18 months. She turns to look at him. "I work in logistics. I route things. I find efficiencies. I think about how objects move through space." She lets that sit for a moment. "You need someone who can do that for the transition. Someone who understands both sides of what you're moving between. His expression is doing the thing it does now, the thing she has learned to read. The warmth that lives under the controlled surface and shows itself in the quality of his attention, rather than in anything as readable as a smile. "You'd be walking into something dangerous," he says. "I walked into it in a parking garage," she says. "I'd rather walk into it knowing the full map." He is quiet for a moment. The city moves below them, indifferent and glittering, and full of the logistics of 10,000 ordinary lives that have no idea what is managed and structured, and occasionally defended in the space above them. Then Yongki extends his hand. The same gesture as the kitchen counter. The same contract, different weight. Maria looks at it. Thinks about a man who kept a promise for 8 years to a dead doctor who sat with him through a fever and told him the world had a deficit of people who helped people. Thinks about a parking garage and red taillights and the specific terror of being pressed against concrete, and then the specific revelation of something far more dangerous than terror stepping out of the dark. She takes his hand. Not a truce this time. Something that doesn't have a clean word for it yet, but will, given time and a city to run and 18 months of transition, logistics, and whatever comes after that. "Show me the full map," she says. And the city below them continues its ordinary, glittering business, entirely unaware that above it, something has just been built that will last.